So what if your brain is like currently acting as an algorithmic trap, just intentionally filtering out every single piece of good news in your life, just to prove your deepest insecurities right?
Wow. Yeah, that's a heavy thought right out of the gate.
I mean, think about it. You get a text from a close friend, and it just says, okay, with a period at the end.
Oh, yeah. The dreaded period.
Right. Instantly, your stomach just drops. You think, they're mad at me. I've done something wrong. Like, they are finally tired of me.
It's almost automatic for so many people.
Totally. But what if that reaction has absolutely nothing to do with your friend? What if it's everything to do with a mechanism in your mind that is actively sculpting your reality to match an old wound?
It is a profound and honestly a pretty uncomfortable mechanism to confront. But that's exactly what we're looking at today. We've got this set of sources that completely flips the script on how we experience our own inner monologue.
Yeah, and that's the core mission of our deep dive today. We were exploring the dual nature of this sculpting process.
Right. Because the fundamental premise we're exploring is that the mind is not a passive mirror. It doesn't just sit there objectively reflecting the facts of the world back to you.
No, it's an active, aggressive sculptor.
Okay.
It takes the raw material of reality
Yeah,
and just carves it into a shape that matches what you already believe.
exactly. And so we're going to look at how thought acts as the thought that eats you, the thing that traps you in those old wounds.
And, more importantly, how you can take that exact same neurological machinery and flip it into the thought that frees you, which is perfect for you, the listener, whether you're, prepping for a big life change or just intensely curious about human behavior.
So to understand how thought sculpts reality, we first have to look at the mechanics, like how the brain actually processes belief.
Right.
The text introduces this concept that the mind operates essentially as a pattern completion engine. Every single thought you have isn't just a fleeting observation. It carries an instruction.
And that instruction is, like, find more of this,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Find more of this.
The sources use this analogy for it that is so sticky. I literally haven't been able to stop thinking about it. They describe a thought as a scout.
Ah, yes, the scout analogy. It's so good.
It really is. So you have a thought, and it sends your nervous system forward into the world like a scout on a mission. And the scout is carrying a very specific brief.
And that brief is, bring me back what I already know.
Yes, bring me back what I already know. When I read that, my mind immediately went to the modern equivalent, which is, the social media algorithm.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Because an algorithm's entire job is to serve you content you've already engaged with. If you accidentally click on a few, like, angry, outrage bait videos, the algorithm doesn't care if you actually want to be angry.
Right, it doesn't have a moral compass.
No, it just says, oh, okay, we're doing anger today. And suddenly, your entire feed is a world that looks fundamentally hostile. But if you engage with hopeful content, it feeds you a hopeful world.
The brain's reticular activating system functions in much the same way. It filters the millions of bits of data we encounter every second.
But hold on, let me push back on this just a bit, because isn't this just standard confirmation bias?
Huh?
Like, we've all heard of that in Psych 101. You buy a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere.
Sure, yeah. The red car phenomenon.
So why is the source text specifically calling this an energetic orientation rather than just, a standard cognitive error?
Well, the distinction there is actually vital. A standard cognitive error implies a passive mistake, like you just happened to notice the red car. But the sources are describing an active structural filtering of reality itself.
Okay, so it's not just an oops, I noticed a thing.
Right. The thought literally narrows the vastness of the human experience down to its own prior conclusions. Let's look at the example provided in the text.
Oh, the unlovable one.
Yeah. Imagine someone who holds the deep core belief that they are fundamentally unlovable. They don't just sit alone in a room feeling unlovable. They actively perceive every single interaction through that lens.
Right, so the scout is out there aggressively searching the room for proof that they are unlovable.
Exactly. Because of that specific orientation, when this person has a completely neutral interaction, say, a barista is just quietly making their coffee and hands it over without smiling, their mind reads that neutral data as active indifference.
Oh.
And if someone shows them genuine warmth, their mind categorizes it as pity or, manipulation.
And if a friend is simply busy and doesn't text back for a day, it is immediately coded as absolute undeniable proof of their unlovability.
The belief becomes entirely self-sealing.
it's terrifyingly efficient
Oh,
because the world isn't actually confirming their unlovability. I mean, the barista's just tired.
right. They've been on their feet for 6 hours.
Yeah. And the friend is just in meetings. But their mind has consented to only receive the data that matches the original brief. Anything that contradicts it, like the friend who texted them 3 times yesterday, is just discarded by the scout.
Yes. The data that doesn't match the brief is rendered completely invisible. And here is where the mechanics get even more complex.
Oh boy.
The danger isn't just that the scout filters reality inside your head. The text argues that this filtered reality creates a signal that actually alters the world outside of you. This is what the source calls energetic confirmation.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there.
I figured you might.
Yeah, because whenever I hear terms like energetic confirmation or vibrational signals, my brain just immediately flashes to crystal shops and pure pseudoscience.
That is a very fair reaction.
Like, are we talking about some mystical aura that leaves my body and magically changes the room? Because that sounds like the law of attraction, not grounded psychology.
It's a completely fair skepticism. Let's strip away the mystical connotations for a second and just look at the actual mechanics of what the source is describing.
Okay, let's hear it.
A looped thought like "I am not enough" or "people always leave me" doesn't just echo silently inside the skull. It fundamentally alters your physiology and your behavior.
Wait, it alters your physiology. Like it physically.
Yes. It changes your microexpressions. It drops your posture. It alters the cadence and pitch of your voice. It dictates where you set your boundaries, who you make eye contact with, and how quickly you apologize for things that aren't even your fault.
Oh, okay, so the energy isn't a magic spell. It's the sum total of thousands of tiny unconscious behavioral cues that I'm constantly broadcasting.
Precisely that. You are radiating a coherent signal of "I am not enough." And human beings are incredibly adept at reading these subtle social cues, even if they don't consciously realize they're doing it.
That makes so much more sense.
Right. And the rule of this architecture is that coherent signals attract coherent responses. If you walk into a room broadcasting through your posture and tone that you expect to be dismissed, the people in that room will unconsciously read that "do not engage" signal.
They pick up on it.
Exactly. They will likely give you less attention. Not out of malice, but because your behavioral cues are literally instructing them to do so.
Then my brain goes, see? I knew I was a burden. The scout comes back with the proof it essentially manufactured.
You've got it.
That perfectly explains why people find themselves in the exact same toxic dynamic over and over again. Like, you change jobs, you move to a new city, you break up and find a new partner, but 3 months later, you're having the exact same argument with a totally different person.
Because the external scenery changed, but the internal signal did not. What changes form remains structurally identical because the root of the interaction is being generated from within. You are quite literally organizing the relational field around your own premise.
That is wild, and that leads directly into the concept the text calls the most refined harm thought can do.
Yes, personalized deception.
Personalized deception. I found this fascinating because harmful thoughts don't usually come at you like an obvious enemy shouting insults. Like if a voice in your head said, "You are a garbage person," you might actually recognize that as an unhealthy thought and fight it.
Right, you'd reject it.
But the deception is that these thoughts speak in the first person.
They wear the face of self-knowledge. They masquerade as mature, realistic assessments of your character. It is not a voice saying, "You are too much." It is a voice saying, "I am just too much for people."
Or, "I have always been broken in this way."
Or, "This is just my personality. I'm a realist."
It's a chameleon. The thought has been so thoroughly metabolized into your identity that it no longer even reads as a belief. It just reads as a concrete fact. It reads as you.
This is the critical distinction the sources make between the thoughts we have and the thoughts we are. When a thought transitions into something we are, the deception is complete.
But if the deception is that elegant, how's a listener supposed to wake up from it?
It's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, if questioning the limiting belief actually feels like self-erasure, like you are attacking your own personality, how do you ever break the loop? If I think my pessimism is just my authentic self, fighting it feels like I'm lying to myself.
What's fascinating here is that the source material addresses this exact paradox. We fiercely defend our limiting thoughts as native to us because we have placed them at the center of our identity.
Right, we protect them.
Yes. From inside that deeply enmeshed state, any movement toward freedom doesn't feel liberating. It feels dangerous. It feels like a threat to the structure of who you are.
So freedom feels like an attack.
Exactly. To realize you are trapped, you have to recognize a very uncomfortable truth. The mind has put the mechanism of self-protection in the service of self-imprisonment. You have taken a harm, invited it into your identity structure, and essentially handed it the keys.
Wow. You handed it the keys because you thought it was you. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if it isn't? What if these deeply held I am limitations, like I am unlovable or I am broken, aren't actually you at all?
And if they aren't native to us, we have to figure out where they came from.
Which brings up the crucial issue of consent,
Right.
because there's a massive difference between thoughts we consciously generate and thought forms we simply receive from our environment.
Absolutely. The text points out that undefended minds, particularly in childhood, operate like sponges. They absorb the atmospheric thought forms around them. And this isn't always about crude, deliberate manipulation or overt trauma.
Right. It's not always a super dramatic event. It's often just the water you're swimming in. Like, it's growing up in a house where the adults are constantly stressed about money.
Yeah, that unspoken tension.
Exactly. And without anyone ever explicitly saying it, you absorb the energetic signal that the world is scarce and resources are always about to disappear.
The mind, when it lacks a conscious protective filter, doesn't know the difference between mine and theirs. It just breathes in the environment.
The sources give some incredibly heavy examples of these inherited thought forms, too. Things like collective fear, inherited shame, cultural self-negation, religious guilt.
Yes, those are massive.
They are. They're these huge, heavy narratives that enter our systems long before we have the cognitive capacity to consent to them. They enter through the cultures we were born into, or through the bodies and behaviors of parents who themselves never consciously chose to carry those burdens.
And because they enter the system so early in our development, they feel innate. They calcify into those first-person I am statements we were just talking about.
Think about the tragedy of that for a second. We are walking around right now fiercely defending our own self-doubt. We defend it as our honest knowing.
Like it's some deep truth.
Yeah, we think we're just being beautifully vulnerable and practical about our flaws, when in reality, it's just some heavy inherited baggage that landed in us when we were like 6 years old, long before we knew how to put our hands up and say, hold on, this is not mine.
It is a tragedy.
Yeah.
But recognizing it is also the key to unlocking the trap. The moment you realize a core belief is inherited, that it is a received signal rather than the fundamental truth of your being, you introduce the possibility of untangling it.
Which means we can pivot. We can look at how to reverse this entire process.
Right.
Because the text argues that the mechanism itself, the pattern completion engine, the scout, isn't broken.
No, it's functioning perfectly.
Right. It's just been given a terrible brief. We can actually use the exact same neurological mechanisms to break out of the trap.
Yes, everything we've described is entirely reversible. This is the transition to what the source material calls thought sovereignty.
Thought sovereignty. I love that term.
It's powerful. Thought sovereignty is the shift from the thought that eats you to the thought that frees you. It is the practiced capacity to step back and observe a thought rather than be the thought.
So you're creating space.
Exactly. You create a gap between the observation and the identity. In that gap, you can ask, where did this come from? Is this mine? Do I actually consent to what this belief is generating in my life right now?
Let me jump in here because
Yeah.
I really want to clarify what this isn't. The text is very explicit about this. Thought sovereignty is not positive thinking in the anemic sense.
Definitely not.
It is not that toxic positivity where you just plaster a fake smile on your face, ignore your very real pain, and chant good vibes only while your life burns down.
No, it's much more structurally precise than that.
But if it's not just forcing optimism, what is the actual process? Like, how does someone practice what the source calls intentional noticing?
Well, toxic positivity demands that you ignore reality. Intentional noticing demands that you look at reality much more fully than you were before.
Okay.
Remember the scout whose brief was to find proof of what the mind already believes. Intentional noticing is simply the act of giving the scout a new set of instructions.
So we're reprogramming the scout.
Yes. The source uses the practice of gratitude as a prime example, but it completely redefines the word. In this framework, gratitude isn't a fleeting, warm emotion you're supposed to force yourself to feel. It is a redirected searchlight.
Okay, so it's not about standing in front of a mirror and saying, I am grateful for my life, when you actually feel totally miserable. It's a cognitive exercise.
Exactly. When you sincerely ask your mind, what is actually working right now? What is true? What is already here that is capable or steady or good? Your mind's incredibly efficient pattern completion machinery goes to work on that brief.
The scout goes out.
Yes, it sends the scout out to find the answers. And those answers aren't made up. They aren't invented delusions to make you feel better. They are real, tangible facts. They were always there in the room with you. They were just sitting outside the narrow, restricted frame of your prior limiting belief.
The world was never as narrow as the wounded thought insisted. The scout just literally couldn't see the good things because it wasn't programmed to look for them.
Precisely.
Let's go back to the text message example from the beginning. You get the text that says, okay, with a period. The wounded scout immediately finds proof of rejection.
It's a see, they hate me.
Right. But if you've practiced thought sovereignty, you catch that instinct, you pause, you create the gap, and you say, wait, is this mine? Do I consent to this spiral? And then you give the scout a new brief. Find me evidence that this friendship is actually secure.
And within seconds, the mind retrieves the memory of the long phone call you had yesterday, or the supportive thing they did last week, and the simple fact that they are probably just typing quickly while walking to their car.
The reality of the secure friendship was always there. You just had to instruct the system to look at it.
And by actively choosing what we notice, we change our internal signal, which means we fundamentally alter how the external world responds to us.
Because the rule of energetic confirmation works in both directions.
It does. If a repeated limiting thought creates a coherent limiting field, then a repeated expansive thought creates a coherent expansive field.
But the text issues a warning here, which I think is so important. This expansive thought has to be genuinely inhabited.
Yes, it can't be fake.
Right, it can't just be a hollow affirmation you recite. You can't just say, I am confident, while your body is screaming in terror. It has to be a genuine reorientation.
The example the source gives is incredibly grounded.
Yeah, the one about capability.
Exactly. When someone genuinely begins to believe they are capable, it completely reorganizes their felt sense of self. They literally stand differently. They take up space differently.
They enter a room with a different physical presence.
They speak with a different, more grounded cadence. And because of that physical, tangible shift, the world responds to that new reality. They are met differently by the people around them.
They have altered the internal signal that reality responds to. They've stopped broadcasting, do not engage, and started broadcasting, I belong here.
And this brings us to what might be the philosophical peak of the text. It frames this kind of intentional, expansive thinking not as a psychological trick, but as an act of devotion.
I really want to break down that word devotion, because usually we reserve that for religion or, romantic love. But the text is talking about self-consecration. Can we translate that into everyday terms? What does it look like to treat your own thoughts with devotion?
To think from the premise of your own worth, not as some defensive compensatory boast to hide your insecurity, but as a calmly recognized fact, is to participate in a completely different order of reality.
That is beautiful.
Treating your potential with devotion means holding on to the image of what is possible for your life and returning to that image with fidelity day after day. You do it even through periods of intense doubt.
Even when there are delays and setbacks.
Exactly. You refuse to let the scout revert to its old, familiar brief of unworthiness.
So instead of just repeating a hollow mantra, it's about treating your own inherent value with the kind of seriousness and respect usually reserved for the sacred. It elevates the act of thinking from mere brain chatter to an actual commitment to who you are becoming.
That is a brilliant way to synthesize it. Holding the mind to the truth of your capability, especially when it's hard, is an act of profound attunement.
So think about what this all means for you, the listener, in your actual life. It means the exact same instrument that was a site of self-harm, the same mind that tortured you for years with meticulous evidence of your own unworthiness, can become your greatest ally.
The mechanism itself doesn't change.
No. The pattern completion engine, the scout, the behavioral signals you broadcast, they all stay the same. You just give them a new master. You direct them not toward the endless repetition of your childhood wounds, but toward the lived experience of what you actually are right now and what your life can become.
To wrap up our exploration of this material, we really have to look clearly at its core, inescapable truth. Thoughts are not private, neutral events that just happen to exist quietly inside your skull without affecting anything.
They do a lot more than that.
They are generative forces. They actively organize your perception. They dictate your behavioral cues. They shape your relational field, and they co-create your lived experience.
Yeah.
The mechanism of confirmation is exactly the same, whether it is harming you or liberating you. The only difference is the direction it is pointed.
And the direction is something you can choose. The text leaves absolutely no room for doubt here.
Yeah.
Thought is already shaping your life. It is happening right now as you listen to this deep dive.
Every single minute.
The only question for you to answer is whether that shaping is happening by default. Driven by those inherited, unexamined beliefs absorbed from the past, or whether it is happening by conscious choice, lived from the inside out, in total alignment with the reality you actually want to inhabit.
You always have a choice.
You have the power of consent in every single moment. Which leaves us with one final lingering question to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
And it's a big one.
It is. We know that every thought you have acts as a scout, sent out into the world with explicit instructions to bring back proof of what you believe. So what exactly is the scout you deployed 5 minutes ago searching for right now?